Yeah, why I don't.
Roger,
Don't do that to me
he's
anymore.
on one
My
today.
late husband used to do that.
He's
I would
on one.
repeat what he said, and people were going, Jeff, are you kidding me? I said, well, my husband. And
Well,
my
you have the red-headed Irish and the black Irish, so why
That's
can't
right.
you have red sections and black?
I'm with you. I'm for all the way.
Do we
So,
have
are
audio?
you Sicilian or?
I am not.
Good.
We went, hi.
Hey,
We went to a place, it's in the heel of the boot called Bari, B-A-R-I, and that's where my people are from.
Nice.
Peeps? Bari, my peeps.
Jerry, will you snap your fingers in front of that microphone? there?
Sure.
Paul's paternal side of the family are all Italians.
Really?
His father, fifth generation American Italian, he's still 100% Italian.
You're kidding.
No.
I have to tell you a story, but that'll come in a minute, about DNA. It's kind of interesting. I really,
Italian, 50% Syrian.
Nice combo.
Oh, thank you.
I like it.
Both Mediterranean countries.
Yeah.
I love it. That's a great combo.
Thank you.
And I like Syrian food. It's clean. I like it. You know, like, it's not too, I can't explain it. It's like, to me, it reminds me of like Lebanese.
Well, it is, it's the same thing, because it was all Syria until
Steve.
Oh, okay.
1920s.
And I
Howdy.
love the cooking.
Yeah,
It's
go ahead.
clean. Doesn't have a lot of.
Lots of vegetables, very
Yes.
healthy. It's like it's Mediterranean, with olive oil and lemon juice and all the vegetables.
So guess what I took home from Italy?
Olive oil.
Of course. We went to an olive oil farm. And the guy's going, this is how you do it. They're serving olive oil in glasses. I'm like, really? This is really interesting. I looked at my cousin and I said, cheers.
So,
How much did you
so
bring
you know
back?
the difference between virgin olive oil and extra virgin?
Oh, yeah,
You know the difference?
I do.
I don't. I'm
Well,
serious.
it's really extra virgin,
The
And-
first press.
the first press, and then virgin is the second press, and then you have the other pressings.
I thought you were gonna tell us the joke.
I see, I was
So
waiting
did
for
I.
that coming, right?
All right. Would you like a joke?
Sure, let's have.
I'm
a
sure they'll
joke.
come anyway, throughout the session.
Let's see if I can think of a good one about Italians. It's not.
No, you don't have to do it.
No
Jerry.
such
You
thing.
can do anything you want.
Should we start? It's 2:30.
Yeah.
All right.
Here we go.
Do we know if the other
Oh,
Debbie's coming?
Deborah's not
Deborah?
coming.
I-
She picked up Lacey.
She's gotta get her horse.
Oh, okay.
Today. And Kareen, I didn't have her phone number, so I couldn't.
Okay.
I didn't. And I didn't.
And Fran's
know.
Who else is part
And
of our?
Fran's in
Fran.
Oregon, Fran,
Okay.
and then Genevieve. Where's Genevieve?
Genevieve's just got back. She's been away a lot this summer.
Oh,
so
she has, so
probably-
maybe that.
There was one more. Long blonde hair.
Oh, Carol.
Carol.
She's
Carol.
still in mine. I heard from her. She's in Montreal. She's
Okay.
coming home.
Everyone's doing their summer vacation.
Yes, it's summer.
What are you gonna do in summer?
All right,
What?
let's do it.
L'Oreal.
Montreal.
Montreal.
I'm Canadian.
Oh.
Oh, I was wondering, what are you saying?
So I've got French Canadians coming. L'Oreal.
I want to go. to-
Let's do a short meditation to get our vibes. That's all. So let's chant an Om together to begin, and then another one after our short moment of silence. Just before we do that, take a couple of deep breaths. Relax the body except for the spine. The muscles around the spine are engaged, but everything else is relaxed, so don't clench anything. And inhale. Now just a moment of stillness. Let the thoughts that may be active, just settle. Join us in one more Om. Inhale. And slowly come back. It's very nice. We were all on pitch today with
We
our
were.
own.
Now you know,
Sounds good.
so the ones that aren't.
You said it, I thought
I picked up
it. That's funny.
on it. We know.
Oming takes a little bit of skill. You got to listen too. It's not just all about my voice and how I sound. It's about how we sound together. Right?
It's true.
It is.
That's funny.
A good band, yeah.
Ciao, buona domenica. Happy Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
We have a true Italian online with us.
No, that's great.
Speaks it and everything.
Oh.
Let's talk about karma. Karma. So last week, let's see, Ivan was here. I believe Steve was here last session. Were you here with us when we started Karma? Steve?
so, yeah.
Okay. Mom, you were here, but you two were not here when we first started. So this is our second meeting on Karma. But it was 4 weeks ago. So we will do a recap of what was discussed the first session. This is our 12th session, and we are on chapter 7. So as I've said before, this book is just so brilliant because it has one chapter for every major life question that one could ask if they're into spiritual growth. It's amazing. So the chapter on karma, I mean, we could talk for months or perhaps years about what karma is and the implications that it has on our life and how to mold our lives around the concept of karma. And we're going to try to pack it into 2 or 3 different meetings here. So let's dive into what it actually means. So just a little bit of a recap. We talked about the definition of the word. So let's go over that again. Now, sometimes the word is transliterated differently. We think of it as being spelled K-A-R-M-A, karma. We also see it sometimes without the A, karma. So the A we kind of put in there in the English language. The K-R is the root word from Sanskrit that means action. And there are several different words that have to do with this K-R base. Another one is kriya. For those of us who practice yoga, we'll know that a kriya is a movement or an action, like a repetitive action or a movement of awareness, kriya. And there are other KR words as well.
It also means to create, to make something.
Right.
KR.
Kriya Shakti,
Kriya.
for example, is the energy or the power to create.
To do, action. And so as with many Sanskrit words, there isn't really an English equivalent to it. It kind of encompasses a whole idea. So some words that could be used to translate it are, of course, action, cause and effect, or more so the totality of action, meaning the causes that lead up to the action taking place, the action itself, and then the results of the action. Exactly. So it's actually a trinity of things that the word refers to: the causes before the act of doing something itself, and then the results of karma. Also, there are 3 varieties of karma that we touched on last meeting, but let's go over them again. The 3 varieties, when looked at from the perspective of spiritual growth. Now, everything we talk about in these webinars is kind of under the umbrella and within the context of the theosophical worldview. Now, we've talked about this, but let's just describe the worldview or the view of the grand journey of our soul. So the concept of karma fits into the grand journey of our soul in the worldview, in that our soul is evolving constantly. Our awareness, our consciousness is learning and growing. And of course, not within the confines of one physical lifetime, many lifetimes. Okay. So we have to remember that when we talk about the three varieties of karma, the three subsets of karma. And there are some Sanskrit words for these, and there are some English equivalents. So from lifetime to lifetime, we build up a lot of karma that has to be worked out in the future. And as young humans or young souls, not a child, not a human child, perhaps, but new soul in the human kingdom, we generate more karma than we work through. So we kind of add to this total storage of karma up until the time that we realize that, hey, I'm a spiritual being in a physical body, and I am on my way somewhere, on my way to achieve something and reunify myself with the Father or my true home. When that realization occurs, we hopefully will start eliminating more karma than we generate. So up until we realize that we're on a path, we add karma to our sanchita karma, our total storage that we carry around with our soul. Sanchita, so S-A-N-C-H-I-T-A, sanchita karma. That's the total storage that we add to when we create actions, whether the actions are physical, mental, or emotional. So the sanchita karma is our total storage that we add to lifetime after lifetime.
So the important thing to realize here is that the vast majority of people end each lifetime with more karma than they had when they came in. Only when you reach a certain stage of enlightenment does that trend reverse, and you catch a vision of how it works, and then you start working on eliminating it and not creating new karma. Karma is not good or bad. As Shakespeare says in, Hamlet or Othello, I think it is. Nothing is either bad or good, but thinking makes it so. In other words, it's our attitude toward things. We talked about the Chinese farmer last time, how things that look terrible sometimes are good, and things that look good or something end up being terrible. So only in the long run, only from a much higher perspective do you see the true nature of something, and you see how it fits in with all of the other pieces. And in the end, it's all good. No matter how horrible it seems in the moment, it's all good. It's part of our life experience.
From a different perspective, of course. We usually have a very limited, lowly perspective of life sometimes. And if we raise our awareness to the grand perspective and see all of our lives, the whole goal, the whole plan and purpose, what Terry said makes more practical sense. It's all necessary. Even what we think is evil is necessary for this growth. So sanchita karma is the first of the three subsets of karma. Now, when we come into a physical body, when we are born into the world, there's a series of things that occur that create the circumstances for that birth and the series of opportunities that we will be encountering in this lifetime. Well, that is a subset of karma known as prarabdha karma. Prarabdha. So that's kind of a long word. P-R-A, R-A, Prarabdha. Prarabdha.
Okay. And what is that again?
That's the specific set of karma that we are presented with in this life.
Oh, okay.
Where are we born on earth? To what type of family are we born to? What color is our skin? What gender is our body? What types of opportunities are going to be presented to us during our life?
Basically, it determines what it is that is intended for you to work on during that lifetime. It puts you in the proper circumstances, and it impels you somewhat in the direction that life is trying to lead you. And then we, of course, do our own thing no matter what.
So it's our duty to recognize this karma, to recognize why we are where we are, Well, actually, I take that back. It's not necessarily important to know why. It's just important to know that it is our karma. So the why is not actually that important. So I'll retract that statement. It's our duty to understand that the situations we find ourselves in is our karma.
Yeah.
And then to work with it intelligently. Now, the third subset is what we refer to as Kriya Mana karma. So we already heard that word Kriya earlier. Kriya Mana. KRIYA MANA. Kriya Mana. So we have the word Kriya, which means action or to create, as Terry said. So who can guess what this means if we have the word action or creating?
Oh, creating new karma.
Exactly, Jerry. Yeah, that's so. Now, Terry and I both said this just in different language just a minute ago. When we don't realize how this works, we kind of bumble along in life and create a bunch of karma that needs to be worked out later. So an enlightened person creates very little karma that they need to resolve later because they're aware of how this whole thing works. They're not bumbling around, bumping into things metaphorically and physically in life. They're living consciously and they're very aware. So when you're very aware, you're not going to be bumping around in life, right? You're not going to be bumping up against hardships as often because you see more clearly than the average Joe or Jane. So Kriya Mana karma is what we're creating in this life that's going into our sack of Sanchita karma that we'll have to work out later, or in this lifetime, perhaps.
I have a question.
Sure, please.
Okay, so I'm tired, so my thoughts is fleeting. Creating, okay, an enlightened person. I consider myself fairly enlightened, not, but enough to know certain things, okay, to be aware. And in this lifetime, I am aware of certain relationships that are not good. And I could easily get into bad karma, or I know it's not good,
Difficult.
a difficult situation. Instead, I personally recognize the karma involved and I think to myself, what did I do to create this karma from past lives? And what am I going to do to break the link?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so and I've been across that, I think, most of my life with people and not realizing this type of behavior in myself until later on in my 40s. And then I got it, So
The two things that are most powerful in creating karma are love and hate. Those are the two things that will draw us back again and again with the same people, with this similar situations until we learn everything that's involved. I look at family members and friends and myself and see some of the situations in life, and I'm like, these people are going to be together for at least 10 more lifetimes because they're
not getting it.
they're not getting it.
There you go. That's the
They're
key. That's
just
the key.
not getting it, and that was one of my questions. Why? I mean, no, I shouldn't say why, because we're all on our path and we honor that, and however we get there, whenever we get there, is up to us through free will and learning, and what to do with it. But why? I mean, like, why?
It's awareness. Awareness.
so
Most people are
unaware.
simply not aware, but you can't make someone else aware. You can
More.
only become more aware yourself. And you can show them, you can
Yeah.
say something, but trying to push it very much is just a waste of time and energy.
They have
Yeah.
to learn it.
They
Yeah,
have,
and they're probably not ready for it. So us trying to force it just makes it actually worse.
well, in my personal situation, I have a family member, brother, with whom, an older brother, we don't speak. He won't speak to me. Okay, I would readily speak with him, and our whole life has been like this. So I know it's karma. Okay, and I'm thinking to myself, Jer, do you want to break this link, or do you want to get really smack dab in the middle of it? And I don't.
Yeah.
So I throw love, I throw energy of light, and that's all I can do.
one thing that we kind of touched on last class, but didn't really go into much depth, is actually one of the most difficult parts of karma, and not necessarily our own karma, but when you see children suffering, or even horrible things that happen, like during the Holocaust, and mass shootings like the one at Sandy Hook and things like that, it really shakes us. At least it does me. And it's heartbreaking to see things like that happen to what we consider innocent children. But we have to look beyond that. We have to realize that everybody is born with a certain amount of karma and with certain things that are predestined to happen. And we don't know what they are sometimes. I mean, obviously, if someone is born with a defect or something, sometimes it is an accident. Nature does make mistakes. That is always a possibility. But in most cases, there is some kind of karma involved that creates that circumstance. So the one thing we can learn to do is to practice vairagya. Non-attachment, non-judgment, equanimity, just acceptance, basically. The word acceptance. Vairagya, V-A-I-R-A-G-Y-A. If you are practicing it, you're a vairagi, just like you're a yogi. One who practices that is a vairagi, and it's a very important part of yoga philosophy, is to practice this, and it's the first thing that you practice. It's part of the purification process of your thoughts and your actions, and that is to practice non-reaction. So I don't know, I can't remember if we mentioned the interview with the Dalai Lama last time.
No.
We mentioned it in our book, that remember, I don't know how many years ago, 7-8 years ago, there was a big earthquake in Tibet. And I think it was one of the interviewers from Good Morning America, or one of those programs, was interviewing the Dalai Lama. And she said, it must be very difficult for you to see your own people suffering this catastrophe and not being able to be there to help. She said, how do you cope with that? And he said, a very wise teacher told me one time, and I think about it often, he said, if you can do something to help, do it. If not, don't worry.
That's great.
So basically, he's saying, if we just agonize over it and worry about it, we're just making it worse. We're harming ourselves. We're harming the people around us just from our negative energy. So sometimes just being calm is the best thing you can do. It's the only thing you can do. And if you can actually help, then help. And if you can't, don't fret about it.
The key thing, which is not easy to practice, but it's easy to say, is to not worry. So when you realize that you're able to do something to help, we do it, and we don't worry. If we are not physically able or practically able to do something about it, we don't, and we don't worry. The worry component doesn't help either situation. It doesn't help you do it, and it doesn't help you not do it. It's just some other little energetic activity that's going on in what Eckhart Tolle calls the pain body, which doesn't have any implication in doing something or not doing it. It has nothing to do with it. It just causes us internal suffering. It's funny when you think about it, because the worry doesn't help us in either. It doesn't help us to do it. It doesn't. Now, what's that, Steve?
It just makes it worse.
It just makes it worse, exactly.
It's very easy for us to explain the concept
Right.
and to understand it ourselves. It's extremely difficult to put it into practice, just like so many of the things, like the non-attachment. Very easy to understand, very difficult to practice, but you have to work at it on a regular basis. And when you do fail, don't get upset about it. Then that's just aggravating it even more. Just laugh and say, okay, I'll do better next time. That's all you can do. Be aware though, every time.
Let me say one quick thing, then we'll move on. These are some of the higher practices of yoga. And when I mean higher, I mean more subtle. And Ivan, this is kind of what I was referring to in my email to you the other day when I said, do you want to learn more about the physical yoga or the spiritual yoga? These practices we're talking about, vairagya and non-attachment and non-reaction, that's yoga. But that's classical yoga, what Patanjali teaches on how to grow your spirit and grow your consciousness. Yes, downward dogs and stretching the muscles and breathing are important too, because we have to honor our physical vehicle. We have to, or else the higher practices we'll be worried about taking care of our broken knees and hips that are out of dislocated and such. So the higher practices, and this is where the true work actually is in practicing these things, these non-attachments and non-reactions. I also want to circle back to what you're saying about relationships being challenging, because that's one of the most difficult parts of our life. And it's sometimes said that our biological family is some of our greatest work in life. And then we have a chosen family too, which is very pleasurable usually, because we choose who we want to hang out with in terms of our friends and our circle of influence. But our biological family, we don't at a conscious level choose them. And that's where the karma exists usually, right? So I just want to give a quick little thing here, and we'll jump to the very end and just say, well, so how do you eliminate the karma? Because you were saying, oh, I need to figure out why, and then how do you use the term discharge it or eliminate or break the link to it. Okay. So first of all, let me say that figuring out why you're there, again, isn't as important, because remember, we don't know the details of our past lives. The details are not important. The essence is, and the essence is you're here in a situation. You don't know the details of what you did to cause that. So now you're here, and how do you break the link? It's simple to say. It's practicing love's tricky because love has a lot of definitions. So let's say non-attachment, vairagya. So that means whatever is happening in the situation, you're not personally affected by it. It doesn't mean you don't care. So that's how you discharge karma. That's how you eliminate some of your bag of tricks that you carried around on our soul's back from lifetime to lifetime. And this is what no one really talks about. People don't really talk about this, but this is how to eliminate karma, is to practice so vairagya has several definitions: non-reaction, non-attachment. It doesn't mean we don't care. Unconditional compassion can operate simultaneously with vairagya. When you have any emotional energy on the situation, we're not there. That's how to eliminate. Correct. That's a link that has not been broken yet.
When we worry about things or become full of anxiety, we're assuming that things should be different from what they are. We feel like, well, it shouldn't be that way. It should be this way. And once we understand better, we realize everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be. And the reason for that may not be what you think. Things are the way they are because of the world karma. Billions, millions of years of karma that has accumulated. It cannot change just like that. It is the way it is. And humans have changed it more than anything. Plants and animals don't create but a very little amount of karma compared to humans. Because of our human mind, we create probably 99.99% of all the karma in the world. And so we, as a human race, are responsible for that karma. We're going to talk a little more about distributive karma. But that's all part of our karma. We need to make a distinction between personal karma and group karma.
Yeah,
we can control, we theoretically have the ability to control our personal karma, but we can't control that other part of karma that we have inherited. You might call it original sin if you want, because it's not something that we can change. It's something we are born into, and we have a part in it because we are a part of the human race.
That's hard, that's hard for me personally. That's just a hard concept, only because I can't control it.
Yeah, well, and all the more reason once you understand, then it's like, okay, well, the world is the way it is because of all of the karma. And so I can do my little part by changing me. I can't change you,
That's right.
I can't change the world, but I can change
And
me.
that's where it starts.
The energy
That's where
that
it
we
starts.
create does ripple out into all, though. It does affect all. So the the zeitgeist of the time is changed by each person doing their own thing. I love how it's always kind of likened to a symphony. A symphony has sometimes as many as 80 or more instruments in it. And if one instrument is out of tune, the whole thing kind of sounds bad. Oh, right. There you go. Yeah, exactly. Right. So each one is important. And let's say everyone is just chaotic and 74 out of the 80 instruments are doing their own thing. Well, each time another instrument gets back on track with the correct bar, correct timing, correct pitch, it starts to sound a little bit better. And eventually it might all sound harmonious, but every one does have a very powerful effect. So we can't really control everyone else. We can't, but we can start to make those ripple effects that do affect others.
Remember too, I believe our next chapter is about thoughts, the power of thoughts.
Oh,
And all karma begins with a thought. So if you create something, if you do something, it's because you have created it in your mind first. If you worry about something, it's entirely in your mind. So karma starts right here. And if you can learn to gain some degree of control over your thoughts, that's when you begin to control your karma. So that again is a huge part of yoga, learning to control your thoughts and the way you think and whether or not you're worried about things. Most people can't have almost no control at all over it. It takes a lot of effort to gain even a little bit of control, but it's very worth it.
This is probably something we'll discuss next chapter, but just about thoughts. Are we supposed to change negative thoughts to positive thoughts?
Well, what is negative and what is positive?
Insulting, ridiculing, belittling, judging.
Okay, I would say then absolutely. I
Or
would say
wishing, something bad happens. to
first
someone
is to
else.
recognize it and say, is this something that is helpful or not helpful? It might even be, not only not helpful, but it may actually cause damage. So if that's the case, definitely we want to change it, whether it's hurting someone else or ourselves. That's, as we discussed brotherhood in one of our early chapters, and it's about recognizing that we are all part of one organism, and that looking out only for ourselves doesn't really help. It doesn't actually even help ourselves. We think it does, it appears to, but in the long run, it doesn't. We end up worse off than if we had worked in harmony with other people for the good of all. So yes, definitely, whenever we recognize the thought that is not helpful, we definitely want to start working on changing that.
We can actually have evidence. I mean, we actually have evidence for why that's important to do too. When we habitually think negative thoughts or harmful thoughts, we don't feel as good. You know how you recognize a mean person? They're not a happy person. You recognize people who are kind of harsh towards others. It's almost never the case when they're happy inside. So why, if you recognize you're doing that, okay, am I happy as I could possibly be? Well, what am I doing that's causing me to not be happy? Well, I'm always talking down to others and comparing myself, and okay, maybe I should change that. So it hurts us too.
Remember too, and we'll get more into it in the next chapter, that your thinking creates patterns. It creates ruts, and in your brain, it creates synapses, so that it's very easy to fall back into that pattern because that's the natural pattern. And getting out of that requires a lot of effort because that is the natural flow of things because of what you've created in the past. So when you do try to change it, it requires quite a bit of effort, more than we would guess sometimes.
As Terry's talking about this, I think about, it's easy to make choices, or sometimes it is not. Sometimes I've discovered, or I've run into people that really find it like it's their piece of cheese to be miserable. Okay, it's like they really like being miserable. And then I look at other people that really work on it, and I always come back to the same thought process. The only way you change something is by changing yourself. You just can't say, I'm going to change my thought today.
Yeah.
You have to really work on what's within you. So then, just a statement.
Steve?
I think it's simple, like you said, but hard to do. I mean,
Yeah.
It makes sense to, if you can help somebody, otherwise don't worry about it, because that alleviates more conflict when you don't worry about something. That's the most important thing there is. But if you can help, certainly help. And I think when I think about it that way, it helps me not to become like a sociopath or something. Somebody that doesn't care. It really does make sense. If you don't think about it, if there's nothing you can do, you're relieving all the anxiety. That makes it worse. And I think that's the way, if people do that collectively, and the more we do that, the more this total karma is probably going to be eliminated. But so hard.
One thing
hard to do.
One thing you can always do is to meditate on it. Send healing thoughts and thoughts of positive energy. And you can pray if you want. If that's what your method is, then pray about it. But that is far better than worrying about it. So that's something specific and concrete that you could do. Remember too that energy follows thought. We don't always think of it that way, but whenever you send out a thought, it is really an energy pattern, which includes energy and pulls matter with it. So everything follows energy. And so when you think a thought, it actually creates something tangible. We can't see it or feel it ourselves, but at a higher level, it can absolutely be perceived.
So like if you say, I wish he would die.
Yeah.
I mean, you just change that to, no, bless him and bless all of us.
Yes, exactly.
On this journey.
Yes.
And when that person cuts you off driving down the road,
Oh.
you just back up and say,
Instead of sending them a curse, send them blessings.
There
just
are
say,
many
thank God he's
tools.
ahead of me, not behind me.
There are all kinds of little tools to use for these kinds of things. A good practice to start creating the different patterns in the brain. So neuroplasticity, brain scientists understand how that works. Our brain is changeable, malleable. It creates new synapses, and it modifies the actual physiology of it based on the patterns that we think. So there are many tools to address this, actually. A very easy one is just creating some positive affirmations for yourself and reciting them every day at a specific time. And I have a list of 20 or 30 that I can very easily email out to everyone, but you can create your own, and they can be as simple as I am strong, I am loving, I am healthy. I am strong, I am loving, I am healthy. It can be 3 that you repeat, it can be 5, it can be 10. I am successful in all that I undertake. I am kind and helpful to all my friends and family. I am kind and helpful to every living being on the planet. I'm a participating member in the evolution of the planet. I mean, it can be, and when you start saying these things on a regular basis, your mind believes it and creates patterns for those kinds of loving thoughts. So that's not going to change everything in 1 day or 2 days. It takes a long time. These are subtle things we're talking about. Also, where the concept of energy following thoughts, that's the whole foundation for The Secret. The whole foundation for it is the whole foundation for manifesting things in your life. Now, of course, physical action has to accompany the thoughts as well.
Right.
But the thought is the beginning. Yes, exactly. The thought ignites every other action. Every other action comes from a thought. Now, taking this a step further, it's very cool to share these things. So I do a lot of studies with a yoga system called Para Yoga in Colorado, and there's a specific class that I've taken several times there, and it's all about changing your habits in life such that they mirror your soul's purpose. And we've talked about this idea of the soul coming into incarnation with certain circumstances that are almost predetermined. Of course, we have free will and we can work with them or against the predeterminations, but finding out what they are and working with them makes life a little bit easier. So we obviously get off track sometimes, and when getting off track equates to discomfort and uncomfortable situations. Well, those uncomfortable situations usually start with a thought, as we're talking about. And this teacher that I've been studying with, he has a concept called the departure point. And when you're going about your day and you have a decision to either do the unhelpful habit, whether it's a thought form or it's a glass of alcohol or whatever the unhelpful thing is that we're trying to change, we can turn that direction or we can turn the other direction towards the positive one. That is called the departure point. And he talks about what happens at that point such that you can make the correct turn towards the path that you want. And there's a whole series of things to do to prepare for this. But one of the things is getting in touch with a goal that you have set for yourself for the next 6 to 18 months. And we call that a sankalpa. It's a goal of your higher self, a goal of your soul. And articulating that in a sentence or two and repeating that daily and then remembering that. And then at the departure point, when you have the option, okay, am I going to take a drink of the alcohol or am I going to go and meditate for 10 minutes or something? Pause. It's very simple. Whenever we have the idea, pause, take a few breaths, and he calls it seeding the gap. So the pause is the gap. Seed the gap with your sankalpa. Seed the gap with your goal, your intention. And then if you still make the decision to do the unhelpful habit, at least you're doing it consciously. At least you're making the conscious choice. And Terry will tell you this, and I'll say this too. It's okay. We don't want to be hard on ourselves. We just want to do things consciously. So although we know that this may not be helpful for us and this direction is, we don't want to be too hard on ourselves. Just be aware of it. Many different tools.
It's easy to see how the opposite direction works just as efficiently. People who say, for example, nothing good ever happens to me. And the universe says your wish is my command. And all you have to do is look around you and you see it.
But see, that just takes me back to a very psychological level of being human. And I know we're having this big spiritual experience, and there are things going on within ourselves. Like you said, the point of departure. Am I going to have the alcohol or am I going to not? Okay. To me, that's like put another drop in the cup of loving yourself. Okay. And through those actions, we start changing. And to me, it becomes easier with those choices because then you're in tune with the more positive end. And the more positive end, to me, allows me to fall in love with myself, to really like who I am, And a lot of people, they're not conscious. So I don't want to judge them because they're not conscious. But sometimes it's very difficult to get out of that path. I don't know. I just segued there. Sorry.
it was always easier for me to forgive others than it was to forgive myself. And then I
Yeah.
realized one day, wait a minute, why am I doing that? That doesn't really help me or anybody else. So beating yourself up, which in some systems is what you're supposed to do, is looked at as, being very ultra spiritual is not very helpful to anybody. So I had to learn to forgive myself and realize that was not a good thing to do.
Right, but that's to me, from, again, psychological, it's falling in love with who you are. And it becomes easier to make the more positive decision.
Everything in life is about psychology, understanding why people do things the way they do. And if you can get some real good insight in that, your path is going to get much easier, and you're going to start seeing a lot more progress. Understanding human nature is huge.
Huge.
All right, let's see. We've got a lot of different topics going on. I want to just recap one last thing here. Karma. So Terry mentioned that animals, other life forms participate in. I think he said something about that a little while ago. So karma isn't only a human thing, but it works differently in other kingdoms of life, in the plant world and the animal world. Karma, as we mentioned when we talked about the definition, it refers to action. Now, the physical part of karma is usually worked out very quickly. The causes leading up, the action, and the results of in the physical world. Usually it's kind of instant karma, as we've heard. And that's the kind of karma that operates in the plant world and the animal world. So in the animal kingdom, for example, if two, coyotes are fighting or whatever animal, the desire to mate with the one's female will happen very quickly, and the one will go into the other's territory, and the fight will ensue, and then it'll be done quickly within a matter of minutes, most likely. Because there isn't a whole lot of premeditation and a lot of emotional agonizing over things in the animal world. So that type of karma does exist, but it gets worked out quickly. The type of karma that operates in the human world, we have a much more robust mental mechanism than the animals do, and we can premeditate things and agonize over things and plan, and then after the fact, we have the tendency to hold on, mentally repeating and swirling and spinning for a long time, hours, days, weeks, months, sometimes years. So that kind of karma takes the universe longer to work out, usually not even in the course of one lifetime, almost always not in the course of one lifetime, but sometimes. And so that's the difference between karma in the lower kingdoms and karma in our kingdom, because we have this mechanism that can just think and create these thought forms and emotional forms. And the quote, I don't know if I gave this or if we talked about this quote last class, but the absolute, or God, is perfectly balanced, and humans cannot disturb it for very long, if at all. Although the actions that we do throw it off, and then it counterbalances itself. So that wasn't the quote. The quote is, "The wheels of the gods grind slowly, but they grind ever so fine." So every thought form that we have will be ground and evened out, smoothed out, but it's a slow process, not fast like in the other kingdoms. All right, where should we go next? Should we come down here maybe, or?
Well, I want to say something about the Lord
Of course.
Karma. That's in the section about karma as universal law. There's a concept that sometimes is brought up called the Lords of Karma, which of course sounds like people, individuals, but it's not really. It's more an impersonal concept or
Before you do
principle.
that, just one thing before you do that, one of the misconceptions that we did mention last session, but it's worth mentioning it again, karma is not a system of rewards and punishment by an outside authority. So there isn't someone or some entity.
Right.
That's one of the misconceptions, which is in the.
Exactly.
So it's impersonal. It's a natural result of actions. So
Which would be cause and effect.
it is cause and effect, but
Exactly.
the causes were generated by no one other than us.
All right, so the idea of the Lords of Karma, is actually from the Secret Doctrine. And the term in Sanskrit is Lipika, Lipika. And this is in shloka number 6. Now, any of you who have tried shloka, yes.
She wrote the secret doctrine in shlokas?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, it's
I didn't know
this is actually the translation of an ancient text.
that.
So she would cite one little paragraph and then spend many, many pages discussing it and then go on to the next one. So it's a translation and commentary of an ancient text. So the shloka says, then the second 7, who are the Lipika, produced by the 3, word, voice, and spirit. The rejected son, S-O-N, is 1. The sons, S-O-N-S-U-N-S, are countless. Well, that sounds totally meaningless. But that's how this ancient text is.
Can we read that one more time?